Hi, Charlie. How you doing?
Good, Chris. How are you? Thanks for having
Good.
me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate this. I know your schedule's busy, so I was gonna just wanted to talk to you a little bit about your career in TV and radio, and maybe a little bit about the Cardinals with their new manager, which was just announced a couple of days ago. And the Blues, St. Louis Blues, are off to a really good start so far, 5-0, and I've got to host Colorado Thursday night at the Enterprise Center, and then I believe Chicago Saturday night.
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to start with the Blues, so the Blues with this unbelievable start to the season, as you mentioned, they're 5-0. They're beating teams pretty easily, honestly. And the Blues teams of the last several years, if you go back to the cup winning team in 2019, really the Craig Berube teams, they're very tough, they're very physical. We haven't really seen the type of team we're seeing this year, which can score a ton of goals. They have all kinds of forward depth. They're averaging, I believe it is 5 goals per game. So it's only 5 games. It's a small sample size. But entering the season, I do think this was the type of team we thought they would be. Much more high scoring than in past years. But on the other side of that, they may allow more goals than they have in the past. I know Ville Husso, the backup, just had a shutout, but the blue line is probably not their strength. You're liking Jordan Binnington, you're liking Ville Husso, but so far the Blues have won a bunch of games. A lot of them have been high scoring. I think it's going to be an exciting team this year where if you like to gamble as I do, I think you're going to be hitting the over in a lot of these games.
I was gonna say, do you think maybe by the trade deadline, if this team's continuing to play well, that they might add somebody in a trade?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the big trade question, which is fascinating, and it was fascinating all summer long, was Vladimir Tarasenko, where Vladimir Tarasenko requested a trade. And if you go back to the summer and around the expansion draft and around the NHL entry draft, everybody thought Vladimir Tarasenko was going to be moved. It seemed like, based on comments from his team, in terms of his camp, his agent, that they weren't happy with the Blues and he wanted to be the captain and he wasn't happy with the way some of his surgeries were done on his shoulder that's been repaired twice. So if you go back 2, 3 months, nobody thought that Vladimir Tarasenko would play another game with the Blues. And he wasn't able to be traded. He has, a $7.5 million cap hit. He's got 2 years left on his deal now. So this year and next year. And at the time, he hadn't really played in 2 years. So if you're another team, are you going to trade for a guy with a $7.5 million cap hit? You don't know if he's healthy. So now through 5 games, he's looking very healthy. He's lean. He came into camp in great shape. Whatever was going on with his teammates there, they got through it in terms of he came in early, skated with the guys. It doesn't seem like it's a distraction. Everybody's playing well. So you wonder now if Vladimir Tarasenko still wants to be traded because here he is. He's productive. He's about to turn 30, I believe, and he's on a team that could be a Stanley Cup contender. Do you really still want to leave that? Even if you were unhappy 3, 4 months ago, do you really want to leave this team and potentially go to another team that's not as good? That's the big question. So entering this next trade deadline now, yeah, could the Blues probably add a defenseman? But are they going to part with Vladimir Tarasenko? Does he still want to leave? That's the biggest question for the Blues in terms of transactions.
I was gonna say, and I'm one of the guys I like on your team is Robert Thomas, who played in the OHL with the London Knights, and then was traded to the Hamilton Bulldogs in 18 to help them win an OHL championship for McMichael, I think. There's one young kid with the London Knights that's going to be in the NHL soon too. So he's one of the guys I root for too. So
Yeah, Robert Thomas is another high end talent, first round pick from a few years ago. You saw how good he was in the Stanley Cup run. Another player that just hasn't been able to stay healthy, but if he can, he's an absolute playmaker. And playing with Tarasenko on that line, you got to think that's a match made in heaven. A guy like Robert Thomas, who I don't think he cares as much about being the big time goal scorer, but he's a great playmaker, setting other guys up, and that's where Vladimir Tarasenko on the other end. That's what he loves to do. He's got a great shot still, so that could be a great match for the Blues all season long on that line. Thomas and Tarasenko and Barbashev and whoever else is on that line as they move forward.
okay, I was gonna say Tarasenko. How many more years does he have left on his contract? Do you know?
Yeah, so he has 2 years left with a cap
Okay.
hit of 7.5 million. So this year and next year. And we looked this up on our radio show yesterday. I believe he's turning 30 here very soon. So he's not old. He's not young. He wants one more contract. He's going to be playing for that next contract. So if you're him, again, even if you want to get traded, if you're very productive on a winning team that could go on another cup run over the next 2 years, maybe that's the best way he sets himself up for a big contract here after 2 more years.
Okay. And I was going to say, I'm a Detroit Red Wings fan, and I miss the rivalry between the Blues and the Red Wings, especially in the 90s when the Wings were winning cups. And then St. Louis was always a difficult out for the Red Wings in the postseason.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I'm from Toledo, Ohio, so I'm an hour from Detroit. So I grew up pretty close to hockey town there. And I wasn't a big, we weren't a big hockey family growing up. Now, we followed the Tigers. My dad was a big Pistons fan. You had Barry Sanders growing up, obviously all those great Red Wings teams with Steve Yzerman, Nicholas Lidstrom, Sergei Fedorov, and we had the Toledo Storm, one of their minor league affiliates in Toledo, the ECHL team for many, many years. So it's interesting because I kind of remember those series between the Red Wings and the Blues, but I wasn't really into them because I was younger and I was kind of coming up not in a big hockey family. But then I worked in Lansing with a guy who covered all those series between the Red Wings and the Blues for years. And then I moved to St. Louis 14 years ago. And it's one of those things that everybody talks about, those series back in the day, Brett Hull and going into the 90s when the Red Wings were great. And the Blues had great teams, remember. The Blues were in the playoffs something like 25 straight years. They could just never win a cup until 2019.
Yeah, and the Red Wings just had their 25-year playoff streak broken about 5 years ago. So, but I was gonna say I do miss the rivalry between the two clubs and stuff like that. And I had the pleasure of meeting Chris Pronger, the former Blues great defenseman, here a couple years ago at a top prospects game in Guelph, and he was nice enough to take a selfie with me and talk to me for a couple minutes.
Yeah, Pronger is a great dude, funny guy. One of the great personalities in hockey. And he's still, I believe he still lives in St. Louis. I know his son actually played basketball at one of the high schools. So I would see him at a high school basketball game every once in a while the last couple of years. I'm not sure if his son, I think he may have just graduated, but Pronger, another guy who, I know he's worked in front offices before, and, could he come back here to be down the road? I mean, the Blues have a really, really good president of hockey operations and general manager in Doug Armstrong. But I think Chris Pronger is going to be a GM and president of hockey ops down the road. And who knows if it could be the Blues years from now.
Well, hopefully so. I was going to say, and I just wanted to, before I get into some questions with you, Charlie, just briefly, what's your thoughts and feelings on the Cardinals' new manager, Oliver Marmol? I'm trying to pronounce it.
Marmol.
Okay, as their new manager, he's I guess been the Cardinals bench coach since 2019. He's only 35 years old. I just wanted to get your two thoughts on this.
Well, I think it's a very solid hire. What's really interesting as it is to hire Oliver Marmol, who's 35 years old, and I do think he's going to be a good manager. This is going to be his first year, obviously, in the big leagues, and he even said this during his introductory press conference. There's going to be mistakes made, especially your first time out there. But what's even more fascinating is how Mike Shildt was fired. It was so stunning. It was a couple Thursdays ago. I was on the radio, actually. I was doing an interview about Mizzou football, and right as I'm starting it, we see on Twitter that Mike Shildt has been fired, and it was so stunning. Now, Mike Shildt had been criticized a bit throughout the season for the way he managed the bullpen, and I thought him bringing in Alex Reyes in the wild card game versus the Dodgers was a terrible move. But also, you did not get the sense that he was going to be fired for any of those things, and he wasn't. John Mozeliak even said that the other day when Oli Marmol was introduced, that when the Cardinals were coming back from LA after the wild card game loss, he did not anticipate making a manager change. Something happened in those meetings between the end of the season and that Thursday, a couple Thursdays ago, when the Cardinals fired Mike Shildt. They called it philosophical differences. And then on Monday during the Oli Marmol press conference, John Mozeliak said that it was an internal matter they felt they couldn't resolve. And it just, they were very vague about it. And then John Mozeliak, the president of baseball operations, tried to follow up on that. But I think he led to even more speculation by being vague again and saying it was this internal conflict they felt they couldn't resolve. Something happened there in those meetings, whether it was Shildt basically challenged the front office too much, whether it was the relationship with his coaching staff. John Mozeliak did say that Mike Shildt and the hitting coach Jeff Albert, that was a reason. There was some tension there, but it wasn't the main reason Mike Shildt was fired. It really makes you wonder if anything's going to come out over the next several weeks and months about exactly what happened, because in those meetings following the season, something came out, whether it was something Mike Shildt said or other members of the staff basically told the front office that something wasn't going well. And that's what led to the stunning move of firing Mike Shildt after 3.5 seasons, where he made the playoffs in all 3 of his full seasons. He was National League Manager of the Year. He was Manager of the Year in 2019, and they went to the NLCS. And after 3 straight trips to the postseason, he's gone. That was a shock to all of us.
One more question I wanted to ask you, Charlie. Did he have 1 year left on his contract, or was his contract up at the end of the season?
So he did have 1 year left on his contract, which was another interesting part of this, because some of the reports from the week prior, so right after the season ends, was that the Cardinals were going to engage in discussions with Mike Shildt about a contract extension. And that's how the Cardinals do business. That wasn't a big surprise to hear that report, even if some fans didn't like that. You know how the business of sports works. If you have 1 year left and you don't give that guy a contract extension, it leads you to believe he's going to be fired at the end of the next year. You don't really want a lame duck situation. That can be pretty awkward. So usually the Cardinals will preemptively give those extensions, which makes it even more surprising how the report a week previous was Mike Shildt, contract extension potentially. You're thinking, okay, maybe he gets a 3-year contract extension, and then boom, he's fired the next week.
I was going to say, I know I'm also a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I didn't mean to go off topic here with Nick Sirianni, but it's going to be hard for Oliver, I think, in St. Louis, because St. Louis is such a passionate fan base and an organization that is used to a lot of winning. How do you think Cardinal fans will take on a rookie manager for next year?
Well, to me, if the Cardinals win, and they have to win a lot. It's not just about winning, because remember, this Cardinals team won 90 games this year. Mm-hmm. They had a franchise record. You know, the Cardinals are one of the best franchises in baseball, going back 100 years, 100 plus years. And this was the longest winning streak in club history, 17 games. So think about it. In a way, Oli Marmol has to do better than that in his first year. Otherwise, it will be looked upon as a bit of a letdown. Now, I do think the postseason is more random, but after a 90-win regular season, if Oli Marmol and the Cardinals, with a team that is really set up to win, that's another part of this. It's not me being a homer. The Cardinals are really set up to win in 2022, the final year of Yadier Molina, potentially the final year of Adam Wainwright. You have Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado still in their prime. You have up-and-coming young position players, Tyler O'Neill, Harrison Bader, Dylan Carlson. The other part of this season, why the Cardinals did not win the division, now, the front office should have helped them out pitching-wise, especially in the month of June when they really started to crater. The Cardinals also, to be fair, had ridiculously bad injury luck, specifically in the starting rotation. There was a period there in May or June where they had almost their entire rotation was on the injured list. The only healthy guy, really, for the whole season was Adam Wainwright. You had a period there where Jack Flaherty, their ace, Miles Michaelis was injured, Carlos Martinez was injured, Daniel Ponce de Leon was injured, KK, Mr. Kim was injured. So it's hard for any team to bounce back from that many injuries in one specific position group like starting pitching. So in 2022, I do not think the Cardinals can have that bad of luck injury-wise as they did this year.
And I was going to say, and who would have thought the Atlanta Braves would be in the World Series this year? But Atlanta, I guess after August 5th started playing really good baseball. And it's not how you start the season, it's how you finish it.
Absolutely. So the Atlanta Braves, they're a great story in how the Cardinals have won some of their World Series in recent years. Some of the Cardinals teams, if you go back to 2006, and 2011, today's actually the 10-year anniversary of David Freese in Game 6, one of the most amazing World Series games ever, October 27th, 2011 against the Rangers. David Freese, who's from St. Louis, hometown guy, with the triple, with the walk-off homer to center field after that. But yeah, so the Braves were a team like the Cardinals that were around 500 for most of the year. And I remember there was a series against the Cardinals. It was right after the trade deadline where the Braves took the series from the Cardinals, and the Cardinals' moves at the trade deadline were not significant on paper. Now, they ended up being very good moves. John Lester, Jay Happ, we kind of laughed at those moves. It's exactly what the Cardinals needed. They needed just some reliable innings in the starting rotation. But you look at the way the Braves really redid, especially their outfield. I mean, they went out there and they got significant big league pieces, position players, and these are guys that have led them through the postseason. You look at Adam Duvall, had a fantastic year. Eddie Rosario, I know his regular season was not great, unbelievable in the postseason. His NLCS was just absolutely incredible. Jock Peterson has been huge for the Braves, some huge home runs throughout this postseason. You saw Jorge Soler, another pickup who started the World Series off with a homer to lead off the World Series. You know, the Braves got aggressive and they addressed their needs, which was they needed a new outfield. They needed impact hitters. I just mentioned 4 guys, and they would not even be close to the World Series without those guys. So you got to give the Braves credit for, look, they also, you have an injury to arguably the best player in baseball. Ronald Acuna Jr. is out, and they still make the World Series. They win Game 1. They have a chance to win the World Series. That's really, really impressive to me.
And I think their general manager, who used to be the Blue Jays general manager, Alex Anthopoulos, has done an outstanding job with the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of the things I just mentioned is, look, I like when teams are aggressive at the trade deadline, especially in years where you think you can be special. And even if you're around 500, you never know what year you could become special. I mean, did anybody look at the Braves, let's say in July, end of July, if you're hovering around 500 and say this is a World Series team? But you never know. If you get the right pieces, a couple guys get hot, you get into the postseason, and it was also they were very fortunate this year because the National League was weird. Let's be real. When you have 2 historically good teams with the Giants and the LA Dodgers, they're in the same division. And so the Dodgers have to be the wild card. Everybody knows the Dodgers and Giants were better than every other team on paper in the regular season and record-wise for the regular season. But guess what? The Dodgers had to play in the wild card game. The Braves were in the weaker division in the National League East. They're able to play a Brewers team that, even though the Brewers were very good throughout the season in the National League Central, the Brewers at the end, they could not hit whatsoever. Devin Williams, another St. Louis guy, the reigning Rookie of the Year, fantastic reliever. He punches a wall. He's not able to play in that postseason series. Christian Yelich was not close to the Christian Yelich MVP player we've seen in recent years. So the Brewers were very beatable, and you saw that. So the Braves got, in my opinion, a favorable matchup in the NLDS. They won that. I never expected them to beat the Dodgers, give them all the credit in the world for taking down the mighty Dodgers. And who knows, now they may take down the mighty Houston Astros as well.
I think that series with the Dodgers and Giants took a lot out of them. Just the Giants winning the division, Charlie, made them have to do a wild card game against the Cardinals, which went to the 9th inning until Chris Taylor hit that home run, and then having to play the Giants in 5 tough emotional games. I really think the injuries, I'm not making excuses for the Dodgers, but I think the injuries, and I think just having the wild card game against the Cards and the 5-game series against the Giants took a lot out of them.
Absolutely. And I'm never going to make excuses with the injuries, but there's certainly factors in the same way that I mentioned earlier that the Cardinals not winning the division this year. I mean, a big part of that was the injuries, especially to Flaherty and Michaelis at the end of May and June, but also the Cardinals not addressing those starting pitching injuries fast enough. No, what you said is absolutely true. Look at the way, so Max Scherzer, another St. Louis guy, Parkway Central, and a Mizzou grad, Max Scherzer, towards the end of the season, was not the same Max Scherzer, even though he was unbelievable all year, especially since the trade to the Dodgers. but he had to push until 162. You thought maybe it could even go to 163, which it didn't, but they were not able to rest a little bit, to set up their rotation at the end, to maybe give Max Scherzer a couple outings at the end where he only throws 75 pitches. So he's feeling good entering the postseason. And then Max Scherzer starts the wild card game. And so you have high intensity games. He finishes off as a closer that game 5 of the NLDS. And then so he's really not the same after that. He's not feeling strong. He said he had a dead arm. That's another part of this. Look, I'm not trying to take anything away from the Braves because they'd say to you, look, we didn't have Ronald Acuna Jr. all year long. We're not going to feel sorry for anybody. But the Dodgers team at the end did not have a healthy Max Scherzer. We know Max Muncy did not play. And then at the end, Justin Turner as well. So, yes, I mean, the attrition of 162 plus playoff games, it's basically who's the healthiest team, who's got the best depth. And right now, the Braves are looking really, really strong.
I was going to say, can I get your prediction quickly on the World Series? Who do you see winning it?
Well, because I now have a 1-game sample size with the Braves winning. The problem is Charlie Morton with the broken leg now being lost for the rest of the World Series is big. I think this is going to go 6 or 7 games. I think I got to pick the Braves now, though, just from winning the first game. I always thought this was going to be a close series. You're going to see a lot of bullpen games. If Max Fried can go out there and be a stud, and he could win 2 games here, I like the Braves' chances because the Astros also, you don't have Lance McCullers. So I think these are going to be offensively driven games. Because the Braves took game 1, I think I'll go with the Braves in 7, but don't bet on that because it would not surprise me one bit. Remember this Astros team. I know a lot of people don't like them because of the cheating scandal and all that, but they've been to 2 World Series. This is their 3rd World Series. They were in the World Series in 2017 and won it. They were in the World Series in 2019. They got guys that have been in October, being down 1 game to none doesn't bother them. Dusty Baker has been a manager for 24 years. He's been to a World Series. This is his 2nd. And I'm rooting for Dusty Baker. I want Dusty Baker to win a World Series. So even though I just picked the Braves, if the Astros win, even though people are down on the cheating Astros, I would feel good about Dusty Baker winning a World Series. So that's my long answer to say Braves in 7, but I say that with very little confidence.
I'm hoping the series goes 7-2. I'm going to go with the Astros in 7, but you're right. I wouldn't be shocked if Atlanta wins this. I just want to see a good long series.
Yeah, I think we will. I also work for the Fox TV station in town, so we have all these games. So it's always good for business when you have good baseball. Now, last night's game wasn't necessarily the most crisp baseball game. I saw it was 4 hours and 6 minutes. It actually felt longer than that. Maybe it's because it wasn't that close of a game. The Braves got up pretty quickly. They're up 5-0, before you could blink. So it wasn't, there were some spots there where the Astros with a big hit could get right back in it. But, some of these games are going to be 1-run games. They're going to be tied going into the late innings. And yeah, I love the World Series. So I hope it's a great one.
Yeah, and tonight's game, I guess, is 8:09 first pitch. Huge game for Houston because you're right. They don't want to go down 2-0 with are they still doing the 2-3-2 series in the World Series? Or did they go back to the 2-2-1-1, 2-3-2 still?
I'm pretty sure it's 2-3-2. I did not check that, but it has been throughout, the rest of the baseball postseason. So don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Okay, I'll have to look that up because you don't want to go down 2-0 and then have to basically win 2 out of 3 in Atlanta to stay alive. And then so I know the NBA did that away a couple years ago, going back to the 2-1-1-1 format. Are you a big fan of the 2-3-2 format?
I like 2-3-2. I know hockey, you go with the 1-1-1, which I don't mind. I mean, I think if you get to a World Series, and if we're talking about different sports here, if we're having an Eastern Conference and a Western Conference, for example, in basketball or hockey, I mean, you are asking a lot of teams. If you're traveling, let's say from California to the East Coast to New York or Philadelphia and back, that's a lot of travel. I like the 2-3-2. I think I'm good with the 2-3-2 in all sports. I know hockey, it's not that way, which is fine. We did that back in 2019 with the Blues, where you're going back and forth to Boston several times, and then Game 7 back there in Boston, which makes it kind of fun. At the end, there's a lot of drama with that. I don't know. I don't know if I have a real strong opinion on if that matters very much.
Okay. I just want to get a few questions in, Charlie. I'll try to keep it 40 minutes. The one question I want to ask you is, can you just tell my audience just a little bit about yourself and when you decided you wanted to pursue a career as a sports reporter in the radio profession?
Sure. So I've always wanted to be in sports broadcasting and more so TV, really. TV is my main job. I do really enjoy radio. Radio, you can make the case, is more enjoyable. It's just kind of more laid back. You don't have to wear the suit and the makeup and all that. You don't have to worry about obviously being on camera, and you kind of just be laid back with your buddies and talking on the radio. So the show I'm on right now, radio wise, is with Cam Jansen, the former St. Louis Blues player and New Jersey Devil. He's actually from St. Louis. He's from the St. Louis area, Eureka, Missouri. But I always wanted to be a sports broadcaster on TV. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. I grew up, I was delivering the Toledo Blade newspaper. And so I'd wake up in the morning, 6th, 7th grade. You'd have to fold the papers and put the ads in them. And I was always watching SportsCenter back then, which was the golden era of SportsCenter. Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann, Craig Kilborn. I mean, you had Rich Eisen later and Stuart Scott. So this is more kind of like early to mid 90s, but I was like, hey, I want to do that. And that dream never really left me. And so I majored in radio, TV, and history at Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. And then I got into local TV basically right after I graduated in 2004. And so here we are about 17 years later. And I've been doing local TV at different stations, Upper Peninsula, Michigan for a couple of years, Lansing, Michigan for a couple of years, and now St. Louis, Missouri for 14 years. And then I've been doing sports talk radio on and off ever since I've been in St. Louis. So for about the last 14 years.
I was going to say, did you also have any mentors when you were starting out in the business?
You know, a lot of people that I worked with over the years. So like I remember my first news director in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan was a former CNN correspondent named Brian Cabell. And so I really liked his approach, because a lot of your news directors and producers in the TV business, and there's nothing wrong with this, but a lot of their background is more producing in-house. And the fact that our news director for my first job was a former correspondent, a former reporter, for me, somebody who wanted to be a reporter or an anchor, you know, he had done everything. He had covered wars. He had covered every big political story. And he was an anchor. He was a reporter. He had, you know, great camera presence. So I think that was a really good mentor to have in my first job. And then, yeah, all my sports directors over the years and folks that I've learned from, and me also, I've never wanted to be like anybody else in the sense. I think you just have to be your own person. You have to have your own style. I think if you try to emulate other people and you're a copycat, I think that looks phony. But certainly there's a lot of other broadcasters that I like, and I'll kind of look at their style and say, hey, I'd like to incorporate their style into what I do. Like, I'm not big on catchphrases, but I do try to be funny. Sports is fun. It's not serious. There's enough depressing news throughout the newscast that sports should be the fun part. So I try to keep it light. I try to keep it fun. I just think when you're broadcasting, whether it's TV or radio, the most important thing to me is to be an effective communicator. So if you're really funny, but nobody gets your joke because you're speaking too fast or they don't understand it, you're speaking over their head, you're using language and terms they don't understand. To me, it's just about speaking calmly, speaking efficiently, and getting the message out and making sure people can hear that. And you're just communicating conversationally. That's what I try to do.
And that's what a few other guys have told me too, that I've had come on my podcast as well. Eric Smith, the radio voice of the Toronto Raptors, and Chuck Swirsky of the Bulls had said that as well. So, like I said, I just like asking these questions and stuff like that and learning from my guests. Next question I wanted to ask you, Charlie. I'm just trying to keep an eye on the time too. What was it like going from Michigan to the St. Louis market?
Okay, I'm actually, since we're live here, I'm gonna have to my
Bring
dogs
him on. I love dogs.
my dog's jumping over here. I don't know if you could hear that, but okay. So yeah, I was in Upper Peninsula of Michigan for what year and a half. I was in Lansing, Michigan for 2 years. So Upper Peninsula is your prototypical small market. I mean, market 200-ish. We're covering high school sports. You had some Division II football, Northern Michigan University, Michigan Tech. I can see you're a hockey guy. You had some pretty big time hockey up there with Northern Michigan and Michigan Tech hockey. But then I went to Lansing, which going from the Upper Peninsula to Lansing wasn't the greatest jump in market size. Like, to be honest with you, I was hoping to jump to a bigger market. But when I was offered that job, I thought to myself, even though Lansing is not a top 100 or a top 80 market, for the sports you cover, I'm really glad I took that job because we were covering big time Big Ten sports. I mean, I was able to be at every Michigan State football practice. You had John L. Smith at the beginning. You had the beginning of the Mark D'Antonio era, which was very successful for Michigan State. We were at almost every Michigan State basketball practice with Tom Izzo. You had a Michigan State hockey team that won the Frozen Four one of those years. Actually, they won it in St. Louis. And we were covering Michigan football, going to the big house. We were covering Michigan basketball. And then when the Detroit team, so in Lansing, you're about 85, 90 miles from Detroit. And so when the Pistons were in the playoffs, and those were some really good Pistons teams, we're talking, this would have been like 06, 07, right after, they won the championship in 04. They made all those Eastern Conference finals. We got to cover the Pistons in the playoffs a couple years. I got to cover the Red Wings in the playoffs, several games. I got to cover the Tigers in the year they go to the World Series and coincidentally lose in 2006 to the St. Louis Cardinals. So I was at game 2 of that World Series, the Kenny Rogers scuff game with all the controversy around the pine tar, which now comes full circle because that's all we talked about was sticky stuff and spider tack this year in baseball. So although I was very excited to get to St. Louis because it was my first pro sports market. So at the time you got the Rams, so you got NFL, you got the Cardinals, you got the Blues, and I covered some Lions games as well in Detroit, but being able to really kind of cover pro sports on an everyday basis, I was super excited about that job. But I also don't want to sell Lansing short because the way we look at sports these days, I mean, college basketball and college football, they're right up there with, I don't want to say they're equal to the pros, but they're dang close. So I felt I was pretty prepared to cover professional sports after covering Big Ten football and Big Ten basketball for 2 years, which I think is pretty big time in terms of the sports world.
Okay. My next question, I wanted to ask you this too. I asked this with a lot of my guests that are in media. What's the biggest difference between TV and radio? Like, I know you did mention you don't have to wear a suit and all that, but just a couple of adjustments that you have to do from TV to radio.
I think if you're looking at your typical sportscast for local TV versus your radio show, which is usually 1, 2, or 3 hours, TV, you usually have, let's say, between 2 and 3 minutes for most of your sportscasts, and you're trying to hit on 2 or 3 or 4 different stories, whether it's a little bit of Cardinals, a little bit of Blues, maybe a little Mizzou football. Now you got SLU basketball, just had their first game last night, St. Louis University. They have a very good basketball program in town. They had their first exhibition game. So you're kind of hitting everything in short 20, 25, 30-second hits. You might be on camera for 15 seconds. You might have some video for 20 seconds. You might have a soundbite for 20, 25, 30 seconds. Then it's on to the next one if you're doing Cardinals, then Blues, or vice versa. And it usually equals out to about 3 minutes. We have some longer sportscasts on the weekend. But that's where, you can almost write that. You have to be pretty formatted. You can't go too much over in time or the producers aren't going to be too happy with you because you have hard breaks in TV. Whereas that's where I think people that do both, even though I love both, I think people enjoy, I enjoy the freedom of radio where there are times where we won't break for the whole hour. If we really get into a topic, we'll end up going 50, 54 minutes on a segment. And if that's a big story, like the Cardinals firing Mike Shildt and hiring Oli Marmol, or if it's the Blues potentially trading Vladimir Tarasenko, I think people really like long form conversations these days. I'm building up my YouTube channel, and that's what I'm trying to do is put really long form discussions, whether it's with a guest or whether it's just with my radio co-host talking about a topic. And And that's where also I do think with TV, you can fake it a little better. You don't have to have all the in-depth knowledge to come across knowledgeable on TV. And I'm not saying TV folks aren't knowledgeable. I'm just saying in radio, if you're not knowledgeable, I feel like you'll be exposed, because if you're talking for 45 minutes about a topic, or if you're talking for 17 minutes, let's say about last night's Blues game or last night's Cardinals game, if you didn't watch it, if you can't bring up some instances where the game, this happened, if you don't know who pitched in the box score and what happened, I mean, it's going to be pretty obvious that you don't know what you're talking about. So I do think for radio, you have to read a lot, you have to watch the games, and you have to be prepared. And if you're not, like, I can tell on the radio when somebody didn't watch the game. I can tell on radio when somebody doesn't really know what they're talking about. Now, sometimes you can mask that, you can fake it a little bit, but to me, you know the folks that really have an in-depth knowledge on these topics.
Okay, good stuff there. And I try to do the same thing, Charlie, with my podcast too. Especially if I get guests from other city, I just try to read up on them and try to learn about their teams and what they're covering as well, and try to be a little bit prepared as much as I can.
No, I think that's super smart, because even if you have a good knowledge of sports in general, and I would say this to anybody. So, I mean, I feel like when I moved to St. Louis, I knew the Cardinals, I knew the Blues, I knew of the Rams, but until you're here and you're either covering the team every day or you're a fan and you live here, you don't know the intricacies of the team. You don't know the 25th guy on the roster for baseball. You don't know the fourth line forward from 10 years ago, right? I mean, the fans know all those guys. That's why it is important when you get to a new market. You know, you got to do your homework. People remember when you have a really bad mispronunciation of a name that's obvious, right? So, but that's also part of it. I mean, obviously, when I came to St. Louis in 2008, there's a lot of stuff I didn't know about the Cardinals and the Blues and the Rams, and I still don't know everything. But covering the teams for the last 14 years, day in and day out, I feel like, especially from that period of time, I have a pretty good idea of what was going on for the last 14 years or so.
Okay. Are you okay for two more questions?
Oh, yeah, we're good.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I try to be good with my guests and all that. So, my next question I wanted to ask you was, can you just tell my audience a little bit about your radio station on the Fan 590 in St. Louis, not the Toronto one, and what's it like to partner up with Cam Jansen? He did play for the Gold Storm for 29 games in their Memorial Cup run in 2003-04, but you're right, he spent his first 3 years in Windsor, but his time in Guelph, he made an impact with his fists, and he was actually a pretty talented goal scorer too. He could score some goals.
I'm going to clip this off, and I'm going to show him this, because he's going to love that. Working with Cam is fantastic. Great buddy of mine, and I think we've done the show together now at least 2 years, maybe 3. The time flies so fast, especially with COVID was such a weird time. I guess we're still in it, but I think it's been about 3 years with Cam, and I've been on all kinds of different shows as a fill-in, as a regular host, you know, morning shows, midday, and this is another midday show. It's 12 to 2. I love working with Cam. I think we have a good dynamic too. I mean, he played sports. You know, I tried to play sports, obviously nowhere near the level that he did. And also, he's a big hockey guy. And although I feel like I'm learning more about hockey all the time, and I have covered hockey a good amount, I'm more of kind of a baseball guy coming up, baseball, football. And in St. Louis now, with no Rams, we got 2 professional sports teams. We got the Cardinals and the Blues. So the fact that I'm more baseball centric, he's more hockey centric, I think it works out in a show that we can kind of throw to each other with our strengths there. And 590, it's funny because I feel like on our text line every once in a while, we'll get texts that are meant for the Toronto 590 station.
Oh, okay.
They're like breaking down the Leafs third line. And I'm like, I don't think this is for our station. That happens every once in a while. But 590 The Fan in Kirkwood, Missouri. It's only about 5 minutes from my house, which I love. We just got a brand new owner, Dave Zobrist, who I think, you know, I'm not just saying this, I think he's going to be great for the station. And I think there's very good things to come at 590 The Fan. We have a really strong lineup, and we have a lot of people who are pulling on the same rope in the same direction. We don't have a ton of egomaniacs, which sometimes happens in the media business. So 590 The Fan, it's a very fun station. It's the kind of radio I like to do. It's not real corporate. We don't have to take breaks all the time at a certain time. Again, we don't have to break every 8 minutes. We don't have to break every 12 minutes. We can go 55 minutes straight on a topic. And I think that's what listeners want, because listeners are now more in the podcasting type type setting. They're used to podcasts. They're used to YouTube. If you like whoever it is, your favorite person on YouTube, if it's Joe Rogan, he goes 2.5, 3 hours. I don't think your listener wants to hear 10-minute segments and then, hey, let's take a break. If you're getting to a good topic, I look, there's been many times that maybe I get to the grocery store, maybe I'm dropping the kids off, but I'm listening to a good segment on radio, and I'm going to wait till it's over. I'm going to wait till it's over to get out of the car. So I think people like more of the long form, in-depth discussions.
And that's what I try to do with my podcast too, depending on my guest schedule and availability. It's when I first started, it was all scripted, but I've learned now to Charlie to ad lib and just talk to people like I'm outside the St. Louis Blues arena with you and just talking to you casually, like as a friend or just as a fan in that. And that's how I try to treat my podcasts.
Yeah, and again, I think that's what folks like listening to. I don't think they want everybody to be super formal. I don't think they want people to talk perfect. I don't think they mind if you use slang, if you swear every once in a while, if you can on that given format. As you mentioned, it's like talking to your buddy. It's like talking to your buddy at the bar. It's like talking to your buddies from high school or college, where you don't use perfect English. You joke around with each other. You rib each other. As Cam would say in the hockey biz, you chirp each other. And I think that's the way people like to talk about, especially sports. I mean, it's one thing if you're talking about something serious, COVID or politics, but sports, again, is supposed to be the fun part of the newscast and of your radio listening. So I think people want that. They want personality. They want to laugh. That's what I want. Like when I listen to radio, I don't want the people that are just inundating me with stats. Now, every once in a while I'll learn something, don't get me wrong, but that's not why I listen to radio. I listen to the radio to be entertained. I listen to the radio to be informed, and learn something, but I want you to make me laugh. I want you to entertain me. If I'm watching a game, I would always rather take the broadcasters that are funnier than the ones that are really info driven. But that's just my personal preference.
And one thing too, also with the podcast, each guest has a different story to tell, and I learned something new from each guest that comes on here.
Right, as you should have. We all do it. I mean, if you're not learning, if you're not listening and learning every day, you never know. You could learn a great story from any random person that you have a conversation with, and they can make you think, and then you look something up. And here's another part of this. So this is kind of my journey with YouTube. And Chris, I know you have a YouTube channel as well. I never really know what's going to do well on YouTube. It's all a trial balloon. And some of the videos that haven't done well have surprised me. Some of the videos that have done well. Now, I may post this on YouTube and it might do really well. I did an interview with a book club, a Saber book club. So the baseball, what is it? The statistical, baseball, whatever the acronym is for, but kind of baseball stats and research group from my hometown of Toledo, Ohio. And I just talked for 10 minutes about Mike Shildt. And it's been my best video by far on YouTube. I never thought that would have been the case. But that was just basically me and some folks from my hometown talking about baseball for what ended up being about 70 minutes. But because that Mike Shildt conversation was very topical, it was very trending, that's become my best video so far. I mean, you never know what topic, what conversation. You and I could have a conversation about something, and then the next day something happens, and all of a sudden that's a searchable topic, and everybody's wanting to know more about that specific subject.
Yeah. And I'm just still trying to build my audience up. And as some of my guests have told me, don't worry about the views right now. Just keep doing your weekly podcast. Keep getting great guests on here, and the things will eventually pick up.
Yes, especially with YouTube, where YouTube is a hard journey. And it's very gratifying, though, and satisfying when you get to the point where if you're looking at the monetization thresholds, which are 1,000 subscribers, that's not easy. That's not easy to get to. I started my YouTube channel with something like, I think, almost 16,000 Twitter followers. I thought I would get to 1,000 YouTube subscribers quickly. It was not easy whatsoever. It took me months. Talking about that threshold of 4,000 viewable hours. Again, if you want to hit a monetization threshold on YouTube, that took me 7.5 months. So that's 7.5 months of grinding every day for nothing till you get to that point to even make 1 cent. So that's where, for yourself, for anybody watching this that's trying to start a YouTube channel or a podcast, yes, don't worry about the views early. Don't worry about the watch time. Don't worry about the downloads, because your best day in your first month, you're going to realize once you really get it going, 5 months from now, 10 months from now, 5 years from now, you're going to do 100 times that in a day once you really get rocking and rolling. So it is a grind, but honestly, now that I look back after the 7.5 months it took me to build up my YouTube to the point that I have it now, which still, by the way, it's not a big channel. It's growing, but it's not a big channel. There are channels that are way bigger than mine, but it's very gratifying after 7.5 months of doing it for nothing to get to the point where it's starting to pay off a little bit.
And I was gonna say as well, like I said, a year and a half ago I had no subscribers, and I'm only at 62. But my goal right now is to try to get 100 subscribers and then just keep going. But you're right about YouTube; it takes time. And the thing what I have going in my favor right now, Charlie, is I have a video resume of my podcast as well, so people can see what I'm doing on YouTube video or on my audio form. So I'm on like 9 audio forms and 3 video forms. So I'm getting exposure on social media.
Yeah, and we can kind of turn this into a YouTube how-to tutorial, because that's another big search topic, specifically on YouTube. And I would tell people, look, I watched folks that were teenage girls on how to monetize and how to be successful on YouTube. I watched all these different videos on what are the tips to try to be successful. And you got to make long videos, right? The longer your videos are, the longer your watch time is going to be. So if this video ends up being 45 minutes, now look, if you post this, if I post this, if the average watch time is, let's say, 13 minutes out of 45 minutes, that's great. That's actually fantastic. You might think, oh, that means they're only watching for 13 minutes. That's taken into account a lot of people that click on immediately and stop watching. I mean, I'm trying to think over the course of, I've probably done 250 videos. I don't know if I've ever had a watch time over 13 minutes. And I've posted some videos that are 50 minutes long. So if you post a 25, 30-minute conversation, and if people are listening for an average of 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, you should be very happy about that. And again, that's how you really build up your viewable hours over time.
Well, thank you. And I'm just trying to keep grinding away on it every day. And I've been lucky to get great guests like yourself and Amy Lawrence and Chuck Swirsky and Dan Shulman from ESPN on here and Bob Sochi. So I say a podcast is only as good as your guests are.
Well, I appreciate that. No, I appreciate you having me on, and you've asked a lot of great questions. Amy Lawrence, I was actually on her show. It's After Hours now, right?
After Hours with Amy Lawrence. She's been on my podcast twice. Really good person.
Yeah, she's great. And I listened to her over the years at her different stations, because I always work nights. I'm driving home at night and all that. So I knew her well, but I'd never talked to her in person. And I was on her show a couple weeks back. It was right after the Cardinals' 17-game win streak was snapped. So I was on that show. And again, that's where, look, you're getting all these guests where people like to just go to a podcast. They like to go to YouTube. And if it's 45 minutes and they have a commute to work, maybe they're on vacation, they're in the car, and they want something to pass the time. They want to listen to a conversation. So yeah, I would say if you can have guests on, and obviously you don't want to take all the guest time. Like I'm totally happy here going as long with you here. I have a radio show in about 45 minutes, but I think the long form conversations, people like that. I mean, people might be on a 6-hour car ride and they might want to listen to 6 different hour-long podcasts to help them get through that drive, in the middle of the night.
Yeah. And like I said, I try to be flexible, Charlie. If a guest tells me they can only give me 15 minutes, I do it. And if a guest says I can stay for an hour, I do it. I just try to make sure I'm on the same page as my guest. And that way they'll be happy with me and I won't upset them or whatever. You try to be flexible with your guests as well.
No, I hear you. And that's where, I don't want to make this whole thing about YouTube, but I've now gotten to the point where if I can, I try to go as long as possible with any conversation, with any radio segment, with any interview, just knowing the longer and more interesting. I mean, you're not doing a long interview just to do a long interview, but the longer it is, the more interesting, the more in depth, the longer people are going to watch. And whatever business you're in, let's not pretend like this is not, hey, people, they want to make money doing this, whether it's advertiser driven. The more people are watching, the more advertisers are going to want to come on board with whatever you're doing, podcast or YouTube, or if you're on YouTube, the longer your videos are, they're going to throw an ad up there every 5 minutes. And I'm fine with that because it's free content. I don't mind skipping through an ad or watching an ad for 5, 10, 15 seconds, knowing I can get really good quality free content on YouTube. Look at all the things you have to pay for these days. I mean, I pay for all the different streaming services because every one of them has a TV show I feel like I can't miss, you know, if it's Hulu or HBO Max. But I'll look at, I mean, The Athletic. If your local newspaper, you can't go to their articles anymore without paying. So the fact that YouTube and these podcasts are basically free and you just have to sit through a few ads, I'm fine with that.
Definitely. Just want to ask you two more questions. Originally, my name on my podcast was 30 Minutes Live with CDP, but most of my podcasts are usually about 45 minutes to an hour. So I just scrapped the name 30 Minutes Live and just went with Live with CDP. That way I don't have a time constraint with my the name of my show.
There you go. No, that makes sense. I like it. Or you could kind of have fun with it. You could just call it 30 minutes or every once in a while 40. But yeah, no, I get that. I think, you know, but also if you call it 30 minutes live, I think people understand it might be 25 minutes. It might be 37 minutes. You know, you'll see these segments on TV. They call it the 2-minute drill or the Minute Man, whatever it is, but it's not exactly a minute or 2 minutes. It's just, you know, we're just thinking up names. Let's be real. Almost every name has been taken. Think about local radio over the years. Has there been any name with a sports reference that hasn't been taken, whether it's the dugout, the box seat, the press box, the bullpen, the fourth line, whatever it is? I mean, all the names are taken. It's hard to find a creative name these days.
I was going to say, yeah, CDP is my initials, and I just liked it, and that's how I went with Live with CDP. So I just want to ask you two quick questions, and I'll let you go, Charlie. This one I had to ask you. I think I've been to St. Louis once, and I went to Busch Stadium, loved the Cardinals, went to the Arch. Will St. Louis ever get an NFL team again in the future? And would St. Louis be an NBA possibility in the future as well? Since you had to think the Hawks were in St. Louis before Atlanta. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think the NBA is going to happen anytime soon. And I feel like Kansas City is ahead of us in terms of wanting or having the infrastructure in place to get a franchise. So if the NBA wants to expand or relocate a team, I could see Kansas City in the picture there. The NFL question is a great question, which I could go on for an hour, honestly, because we're right in the middle of a lawsuit, basically, where if the NFL and the Rams don't settle basically before January, there's going to be a jury trial in St. Louis where the city of St. Louis and the local municipalities, the city and the county, are going to be in a jury trial against the Rams and against the NFL. And if you read about this, you can watch. I have probably 5-6 videos about this on YouTube. St. Louis seems to have the NFL and the Rams in a very tough spot. And I don't know what the settlement amount would be or the damages would be, but a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me have said it could be in the billions. And if that's the case, is an expansion team on the table? Maybe that's a pipe dream. I do think that makes the most sense. If the NFL has to cut a huge check, wouldn't you rather cut that check towards a team that could benefit the whole league? And then at the end of the day, there's some folks in St. Louis that are like, oh, screw the NFL. But the reason we're mad in St. Louis is because we lost our NFL team. So if we got another team, an expansion team, let's say in the next 5, 7, 8 years, in the same way the Cleveland Browns, they lost the Browns, but the Browns became the Ravens, and the Cleveland city retained the name the Browns. Now, we don't want that. Just give St. Louis a new team, a team that started here. So I would never rule out the NFL in St. Louis. Now, maybe it takes 25 years. Who knows? I mean, all these relationships where St. Louis is really mad at Roger Goodell and Stan Kroenke, these guys don't live forever. Some of these owners are really old. So, hey, if St. Louis turns things around also and they become a more growing, booming city and the crime rate goes down and you have business coming to St. Louis and it starts to grow, could we get an NFL team in the next 20 years, 25 years? Absolutely.
Because I think it's a great market. The only thing is, what about the current state of that stadium? Is it up to NFL standards, or would they have to renovate it or build a new stadium downtown?
Well, that was the whole issue basically with why the Rams were able to leave after 20 years of their 30-year lease. Was it was not top tier, which is a clause in the lease, which was a terrible clause that St. Louis should never have agreed to, that you had to be like top 25% of stadiums. And how do you even measure that? But think about it. In 20 years, almost every team built a new stadium. So if you don't build a new stadium about every 20 years, you're probably not going to be top tier. And that's why the Rams were able to leave. And yeah, the Edward Jones Dome is not the greatest building. The St. Louis task force had a riverfront stadium plan ready to go. They had that ready to go, which is one of the reasons St. Louis was screwed over. Is San Diego didn't have that. Oakland didn't have that. St. Louis had an actionable stadium plan ready to rock and roll. And so, look, let's just say hypothetically, and it's probably not going to happen, but let's say in 5-7 years, the St. Louis market gets a team. Maybe it's a team that's moved from somewhere else. Maybe it's an expansion team. The Edward Jones Dome is not so bad that you can't play there for 1, 2, 3 years while this new stadium is being built. Is it the greatest stadium? No. But again, we have a soccer stadium being built downtown right now for MLS, which will start in 2023. It takes a couple years to build a stadium. So if St. Louis gets a team down the road and that team has to play in the Edward Jones Dome for 1, 2, 3 years before the brand new, hopefully beautiful downtown riverfront stadium or a county stadium in Maryland Heights is built, yeah, the dome is not so bad that you can't play a couple years of the NFL in there. Look, the St. Louis Battlehawks of the XFL played there last year. And if the XFL comes back in 2023, they're going to play there again. So it's a fine building. It's not the greatest building by any means. There's not a lot of natural lighting. It's a little bit dark and dungy in there, but you can play some football games for a couple of years before you get hopefully the great stadium downtown. But who knows if that's actually ever going to happen.
Okay, because I grew up in the 70s, and I remember the St. Louis Cardinals football club with Neil Lomax and some of the great players. And one of my favorite Wolverines of all time played for the St. Louis Cardinals, Dan Dierdorf, who's retiring this year, along with Jim Brandstatter. By the way, I'm a Wolverines fan, by the way.
Well, I have to cut this interview short then, because being from Ohio, especially Toledo, if you know that market, it's 50-50, Michigan and Ohio State, and it's basically the family you're born into. And I was born into an Ohio State family. My uncles and aunts went there. I did not go there, but my sister went there. My sister's husband, my brother went there for a little bit. So we're an Ohio State family, true and true. So I have to say, I feel bad for you, Chris, because for the last 20 years, it's not gone well for your side. And this is coming from somebody who grew up in the John Cooper era, where we lost to Michigan as an Ohio State fan. I feel like they were 11-0 every year. Yeah. And Michigan was 8-3 every year. And Michigan beat Ohio State in the 90s every single year with all these great Ohio State teams. So the fact that Ohio State has dominated Michigan the way they have in the last 20 years is actually amazing if you really start to look at the fact that isn't it like 19-1? It's something that's just absurd.
Yeah, and this, you know what the sad part is? Michigan, I'm a fan, obviously. They're 7-0, but nobody cares about 7-0. The only games we care about is Ohio State and Michigan State. And if we don't win those games, then it doesn't matter. Like, Jim Harbaugh has a really good record in his 7 years, but like I said, unless you win the games against the big schools like Ohio State and Michigan State, it doesn't seem to matter to the fans as much.
And that's how it should be, in my opinion. The rivalry games, especially the game, Ohio State, Michigan, but the other one, which is coming up this Saturday. Look, Michigan State is one of the most underrated rivalries in sports. And I was there for a couple years, and I was actually at the game, the Mike Hart game, the little brother comment. It was in the trailer, the media trailer, because Michigan State was up in that game. And somebody asked Mike Hart, the great Michigan running back at the time, you know, what was it like when Michigan State got up on you? How'd you feel? And he said, oh, it's like you're playing your little brother. It's like you're playing your little brother in basketball. You kind of let him win a little bit before you show him, hey, big brother's going to dominate. And it's this clip that's still to this day, if you watch the Fox promos, this is probably 15 years later. They still use that Mike Hart comment. So the whole little brother, big brother, the Michigan State fans and the Michigan fans, they chant little brother at the end of every football game and every basketball game if they beat the other team. That's become kind of like one of the great legendary stories of that rivalry, which again is very underrated. I'm super excited to watch the game this week because, look, the Big Ten, I know Penn State just got beat by Illinois, but when you have Ohio State, Michigan State all rolling, Penn State in that same division, whoever comes out of that side is going to be very battle tested.
Definitely. Okay, Charlie, I'm going to let you go. Just quickly, any advice for those that are watching, looking to pursue a career in TV and radio? And where can my audience, again, find you on social media? And when is your radio station or radio show with Cam on the Fan 590 in St. Louis normally?
Okay, so radio 590 The Fan, KFNS. The Website is 590thefan.com. Our show is 12 to 2. It's actually called the Cam Jansen Show from 12 to 1, and then the Charlie Marlowe Show from 1 to 2, but we're basically on together. We kind of just flip-flop, which is almost kind of like an inside joke. But you can check out all the shows on 590thefan.com. I post select segments and also like podcasts and TV stories on YouTube. You can just subscribe. Charlie Marlowe is my name on YouTube. Twitter, Charlie Marlowe _. That's really kind of all. I'm not really on Instagram or Facebook that much. And then just advice for young broadcasters, I would say, do something you're passionate about. Get all the reps that you can, even if it's something that you're not passionate about. Just getting the reps live, radio, TV. If it's in a small market, look, you're not going to use that tape anyway because you're going to be much better, but you're going to get better as you do it. And then it kind of gets back to the earlier conversation we had, which is don't necessarily depend on having, in this day and age, don't depend on having to get a job at a radio station, having to get a job at a TV station. If I was 18-year-old me going to college at Bradley again, I would, and I tell all these kids this, I would say start your YouTube channel right now. I would say start your podcast right now, whether that's in high school. And I'm not on TikTok and all that, but if you can make money on TikTok or Instagram, doing takes or doing videos or doing funny videos on YouTube, on your podcast, heck, maybe you graduate college, or maybe you get through high school in a couple years of JUCO, or maybe you don't go to college, but you're trying to work at a broadcast center or build up your career. Maybe you get to a point where, hey, I can actually make money off YouTube or podcast or social media myself. Maybe I don't have to go work for a TV or radio station, which is still great. Don't get me wrong. But if you can do both, to me, that's the perfect world right there. I do think the media world is really changing. So, I mean, I love working at a TV station. I love working at a radio station, but I'm also very envious of some of these young kids who they're making their living on TikTok. They're making their living on YouTube. They never went to college. They might be in high school. That's pretty dang impressive to me. So if you want to be in the media world, I would start that at a very young age.
I wish I had done that. I'm trying to do it at 49, but it's some of my guests have said it's never too late. And the thing is that I'm going to hopefully eventually try to get some sponsors for my podcast as well. Charlie, I would love to talk to you more, but I know you got to get going for your radio show this afternoon. But tell Cam Jansen the Guelph Storm are celebrating their 30th anniversary this year, and to check out their website as well, guelphstorm.com. Because like I said, he's still remembered here in Guelph, even for his 1 year here in Guelph on the Memorial Cup run. I'd love to have Cam come on my podcast one day too.
I'm going to make him come on your podcast. I'm going to force him to come on. I'm going to tell him today, I'm going to see him about 30 minutes. I'm going to tell him he has to come on.
Okay, and I'm definitely going to listen to your show later tonight when I'm at my other current job, so I'll definitely check you out. And I want to say thank you so much, Charlie. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I might have to start cheering for the Blues and Cardinals a little bit.
There you go. Chris, appreciate it. Thanks, man. That was fun.
Thank you, Charlie. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, you too.